Hello, my friends. We are picking up with chapter 26, and Jesus was just speaking on the Mount of Olives, encouraging his listeners to be ready, and even if it seems that he is returning late, um, to be ready. So, picking up with chapter 26, when Jesus had finished all these words, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man is to be handed over for crucifixion." The amazing thing right here is that he told them outright before he was put on a cross that he would be put on a cross. And he hadn't been arrested yet. There was no provocation for him to be crucified. And yet he was telling them, pretty much like in a week's time, I'll be dying on a cross. So, but I mean, Matthew didn't even comment about that sentence here in his word, except later when after he rose again, then the disciples understood. All right, so verse 3. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people were gathered together in the court of the high priest, named Caiaphas, and they plotted together to seize Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they were saying, "Not during the festival, otherwise a riot might occur among the people." Now when Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon the leper, which I'm guessing he was no longer a leper, but the name stuck, a woman came to him with an alabaster vial of very costly perfume, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at the table. But the disciples were indignant when they saw this and said, "Why this waste? For this perfume might have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you bother the woman? For she has done a good deed to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you do not always have me. For when she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial." That's the second time he's talked about him dying at this meal. "Truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be spoken of in memory of her." Then one of the 12, named Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me to betray him to you?" And they weighed out 30 pieces of silver to him. From then on, he began looking for a good opportunity to betray Jesus. Now, on the first day of unleavened bread, his disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city of a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I am to keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" The disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. Now when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12 disciples. As they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me." Being deeply grieved, they each one began to say to him, "Surely not I, Lord." And he answered, "He who dipped his hand with me in the bowl is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man is to go, but as it is written of him, just as it is written of him, but woe to the man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. And Judas, who was betraying him, said, "Surely it is not I, Rabbi." Jesus said to him, "You have said it yourself." I think it's interesting here that when the other disciples said, like, "Surely not I, Lord," they called him Lord. Yet Judas called him Rabbi, which is teacher, not Lord, which is a much higher sign of respect. Verse 26, while they were eating, Jesus took some bread, and after a blessing, he broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat. This is my body." And when he had taken a cup and given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for forgiveness of sins." There he is, calling out the reason for his death. And you know, the Old Testament is also referred to as the Old Covenant, and the New Testament is referred to as the New Covenant. The New Covenant ushering in the forgiveness of sins. So here Jesus is calling out the very reason that he has come to earth. And again, he's saying, like, my body is broken, my blood. So he hadn't died yet. So they, I'm sure, did not know what he was talking about at that time. But afterwards, it made sense. And I have to say, God works like that a lot. Where when something's happening, we have no clue why it's happening the way it is. But afterward, it makes so much sense. Verse 29, Jesus says, "But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." After singing a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, "You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered." So there Jesus is calling out, he's quoting Old Testament scripture, which, I mean, we say Old Testament, right? But to the Jewish people, and especially at this time, there was only one scripture, and it's what we refer to as the Old Testament. So he is quoting scripture here and applying it to himself and to his disciples. The scripture being, "I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered." Then Jesus continues talking. "But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee." So, frame of reference, the disciples had not seen people come back to life on a regular basis. I could say ever. However, Jesus had raised Lazarus from the dead. But they certainly hadn't, they don't even see on the horizon yet that Jesus will be crucified. They don't know that that is about to take place. But Jesus is calling it out. And he's saying, but after I've been raised, well, they're not used to people being raised. So he's calling out, I'm going to be raised. So they're hearing these words and they're making no sense whatsoever. I think our lives are like that. At different times, when we experience things, we have no understanding and no comprehension of what's happening. Later, when we can look back, we see the value in what happened. And here, Jesus is even calling out the village where he will go and see them, and that is Galilee. But Peter said to him, even though all may fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Kudos to Peter for saying that he'll be a friend to Jesus no matter what, and that he doesn't plan on giving up on the one who he has already declared as the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said to him, truly, I say to you that this very night, before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And can you imagine your best friend saying that you're not going to be a friend even that night? Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same thing too. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, sit here while I go over there and pray. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and keep watch with me. And he went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will. And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said to Peter, so you men could not keep watch with me for 1 hour? Keep watching and praying, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again a second time and prayed, saying, my Father, if this cannot pass away unless I drink it, your will be done. Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them again and went away and prayed a third time, saying the same thing once more. I just want to reiterate that in Hebrew writing, to underline something and boldface it or make it in a big font, what they did is they wrote it 3 times. So this has happened 3 times, and that is to get the attention that this section is extraordinarily important. Jesus prayed 3 times, and 3 times his disciples were found lacking. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. Behold, the one who betrays me is at hand. While he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came up, accompanied by a large crowd with swords and clubs, who came with the chief priests and elders of the people. Now he who was betraying him gave them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Immediately Judas went to Jesus and said, hail, Rabbi, and kissed him. And you know that in other cultures, like a kiss on the cheek is a regular greeting. And Jesus said to him, friend, do what you have come for. Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus reached and drew out his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, put your sword back into its place, for all those who take up the sword shall perish by the sword. Isn't that interesting that Jesus calls out like he's telling a lesson right in the middle of being arrested? Verse 53, or do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels. How then will the scriptures be fulfilled, which say that it must happen this way? At that time, Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as you would against a robber? Every day I used to sit in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place to fulfill the scriptures of the prophets. Then all the disciples left him and fled. So, strategy. Jesus is taking time out to say, what you're doing right now is foretold in the scriptures. He wanted them to know, this is it. This is what's happening. This was foretold. It is happening now. So he is literally taking time out to bring their attention to the Holy Scriptures and the prophecies that he is fulfilling so they don't miss it. Those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. So it's after midnight, and they are all gathered together. But Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. They did not find any, even though many false witnesses came forward. But later on, 2 came forward and said, this man stated, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days. The high priest stood up and said to Jesus, do you not answer? What is it that these men are testifying against you? But Jesus kept silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. Okay, so the first thing is that these 2 witnesses came forward and supposedly quoted Jesus as saying, I will destroy. I am able to destroy the temple of God. Well, Jesus never said he would destroy the temple of God. But he did say he could rebuild it in 3 days. So Jesus doesn't even respond to this accusation. He doesn't back himself up. He doesn't say, hey, I never said that, guys. You heard wrong, or, you twisted the facts. But then the high priest lays it on him. I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. This is where it's at. This is why he was sent to the cross, because of the blasphemy that they were calling out, that Jesus said he was the Son of the living God. Jesus said to him, you have said it yourself. Nevertheless, I tell you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. So here Jesus is wasting no time whatsoever of continuing to quote scripture to let them know he is the one whom the scriptures were talking about. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, he has blasphemed. What further need do we have of witnesses? Behold, you have now heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They answered, he deserves death. Then they spat in his face and beat him with their fists, and others slapped him and said, prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is the one who hit you? Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him and said, you too were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you are talking about. When he had gone out to the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." A little later, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Surely you too are one of them, for even the way you talk gives you away." Apparently the Galilean accent was quite strong. Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know the man." Isn't that an interesting buildup as far as Peter goes? First he just said, "I don't know what you are talking about." Then he swore with an oath, "I don't know the man." Then he cursed and swore and said, "I don't know the man." And immediately a rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the word which Jesus had said, "Before a rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. And that's the end of chapter 26. And I just have some thoughts about Jesus taking the time out to tell Peter ahead of time that Peter would deny him 3 times. And you're talking about 2 very, very good friends. Peter adoring Jesus, having left his fishing business 3 years before, had dropped everything to follow Jesus. And Peter was the one who called out that when Jesus said, "Who do you say I am?" and he said, "You are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God." And here Jesus took the time out to say, "Peter, you will actually be denying me 3 times. And this isn't on any day of the whole year. This is on the night that Jesus is arrested. So this was on a very extremely emotional night where his best friend is being arrested and headed toward crucifixion. So I don't totally understand the strategy that Jesus used of why that night, and why did he allow for Peter to say 3 times, again 3 being very significant, very powerful in that it was 3 times, Jesus allowed Peter to deny him 3 times. But the story doesn't end here. This is a precursor to a much bigger story full of life and healing and coming back in, but so much tighter, with so much more hope, with so much more joy in the future. And I really need to be listening to these words myself, that God allows for us to go through extremely difficult times in preparation for what he has ahead. So with that, I love you. And I will mention that the scripture quotations are from the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, copyright by the Lockman Foundation at www.lockman.org. I wish you well, my friends.